What's up, guys, and welcome to One Take. I'm Gil, and today we're talking about Raised by Wolves, Season 2, Episode 7, titled Feeding. This will be a full recap and review, so spoilers ahead. The episode opens with Paul feeding fruit from the tree to a bunch of the atheists, though Campion gives it a sniff and decides not to have a taste. Paul returns to Marcus, and apparently their belief is that the fruit will turn the atheists into believers. They'll rise up against Mother, and Soul will return Sue to them. Mother pays the tree a visit, and when she presses her hand to it, somberly says, Sue, as though she can feel Sue in there, and asks why she listened to the voice. Then Marcus and Paul start to have a little crisis of faith. It's hard to hear without headphones, but the tree emits a heartbeat, and Paul notices it slowing down. He wonders if they did something wrong. Mark offers that maybe he was wrong to believe in Soul. And this is a pretty important, heartbreaking moment. Paul and Marcus have been two of the most devout believers on Kepler 22b. They're two of the few who have interacted with this entity that they believe to be divine, and now they're seeing that the entity may be out for itself, and they're just pawns. They're expendable, and they may have lost Sue. If you listen to the after episode behind the scenes, they explain that the tree is an example of the botanitech Father talked about. The tree is essentially a way of plugging into the planet and drawing some of its power. I assume dark photon energy. As we see later in the episode, the fruit and the tree itself are meant for the serpent. The tree draws the planet's power, then feeds it to the serpent, giving it that power. So what happens to the people who ate the fruit? It seems like that was just Paul and Marcus's idea. I don't think it was part of the entity's intent. It may end up having no effect. It may just be poisonous, killing some of the atheists, or who knows? Maybe it'll give them a small taste of what Marcus got when he ate Mother's eyes. Some small taste of that power. Meanwhile, Father, Hunter, and others help Tempest with the search for her baby. I liked seeing Tempest's ingenuity, taking skin from one of the creatures to protect Hunter's underwater drone. Last season, she was the first one willing to kill one of the land-dwelling creatures, and I thought that showed a certain side to her, that she's a little more courageous and a little more forward-thinking on what needs to be done. This felt like we were seeing a little of that side of her again. Their search eventually leads them to Vril, who's now masked her grotesque visage. She claims to have heard a baby crying and can take them there. Holly and Hunter are very against the idea of trusting her, but Tempest will do anything to find her baby. So they follow her, though Father sends Vita and Holly home. And Mother finds them eating some of the fruit. She stops them and tells Holly to take Vita to the med lab. Then she finds the serpent seemingly reacting to the fruit. It bangs against the cages and escapes. Then it eats the fruit and flies off. Back at the tree, Marcus and Paul hear Sue over the radio, saying, "Burn me," over and over. The tree narrows, preparing for what comes next, and Marcus tries to burn it, but before he can, the serpent swallows the tree. Sue on the radio was super creepy and another heartbreaking moment. She is one of my favorite characters. So if she's really gone and her last moment is a disembodied plea to snuff out what little of her remains, that's pretty sad. And what's actually going on here? Like we saw with Grandmother, botanitech needs to be fed to grow. In her case, she needed fuel blood. Maybe to grow this particular tree, one of the ingredients is some of the biology contained inside a human. So Sue was used in the process and apparently turned into a tree, but it seems that some of her consciousness remains. And they've referred to the entity as a signal so many times, it's not surprising that, as part of the tree, Sue may have found a way to tap into that signal and sort of speak through it. Anyway, the effect is immediate. The serpent sprouts tentacles, what looks like fins, and starts shooting lightning out of its mouth. Mother arrives just then and tries her scream attack, but the scream gets sucked back in. her caregiving program will not allow her to attack the beast. It screams back and sends her plummeting to the ground. Back with Father, they're forced to stop for a moment so Hunter can do some maintenance on his headless android, and I enjoyed the android having to silently indicate his leg issue, then gives Father the finger for calling him useless. Hunter and Father get into a little argument that leads Hunter to ask, "What happened to you?" And it's a good question. With the group having joined the trust, plus with just how complicated things have gotten, it does seem like Mother and Father, but Father especially, have lost control. The kids are basically all doing whatever they want, mostly giving up any pretense of Mother and Father being their leaders. Campion and Vril share another moment. She feels that she has to prove herself as a source of happiness, so they don't abandon her. And Vril has been one of my favorite parts of the season, continuing the trend of androids being the MVPs on this show. She's just been great. In one episode, she's a horrific killing machine, and in another, she's a tragic robot yearning to be human. Marcus and Paul get Mother into the habit tank, where she's weakened but still running, and she finally admits the truth. The serpent is her child, and as a result, her caregiving program prevents her from killing it. She suggests they visit Father's ancient android, which, possessing superior technology, may be able to reprogram her. As they make their way there, they witness the weaponized serpent's destructive power. On the radar, they see it make contact with an encampment, and over the radio, hear the people die. Then the serpent heads toward the shoreline, where it takes out Father, and Campion hides out in a tank with Vril. She suggests that the serpent is hunting Campion specifically. She also refers to its scream as a necro scream. Not that we needed it, but that's of course further confirmation that it's using powers similar to Mother's. And the two of them realize it must have come from her. We also see the second mention of a returning theme this episode, that androids, as sentient beings, have just as much worth as humans. Campion told Father earlier that his happiness matters, and here he tells Vril that she has a soul. We've also seen Campion go back and forth, being pro or anti-Mother depending on the episode or season. Here, he's angered that she lied to him, so I assume their next reunion won't be all smiles. Outside, Father recovers with Hunter and Tempest. He also reveals the truth that the serpent came from Mother. So at this point, the jig is up. Basically, everyone knows the truth. Then, Father hears a noise, and they find Tempest's baby with the creature. Father prepares to kill the creature, but when Tempest sees it cradling and feeding the baby, she stops him. She says maybe this is supposed to happen. This is what's best for her. But Hunter can't abide by that. He goes back to the cave, kills the creature himself, and retrieves the baby. And I can't say I blame him. We don't know anything about these creatures. We don't even know if they have intelligence. For all we know, it's raising the baby to eat it, or worse. So leaving the baby in the quote-unquote care of the acid water monster, I don't think I could stomach it. At the same time, you could easily see why Tempest would want to leave the child behind and look for any excuse not to have to hold on to it. I also think that the baby is not out of the woods yet. I assumed and still assume that the creature was acting on behalf of the intelligence, or the entity as grandmother calls it later. It wants something with that baby, and I assume it'll come for her again. If not, and the creature was just acting independently, well, I find that to be a weird aside in the plot. I also suspect that this baby will be part of what keeps Hunter around. He's been talking about leaving. That's why he built his helper bot. But if he thinks he needs to stick around to ensure the baby's well-being, I think he will. Meanwhile, Campion and Vril leave the tank. He heads in the opposite direction of the colony to avoid leading the serpent back to civilization. And at the colony, Mother speaks with Grandmother. Very interesting conversation here. Grandmother refers to the ancient society who built her as technocrats. They fought the believers and built androids as shepherds to ensure the survival of the human race. And the serpent will try to destroy the planet because that is what the entity wants. But she doesn't know why it wants that. Apparently, humans on Kepler 22b spent centuries trying to answer that question and weren't able to. Specifically, the limits of their own rationality made it impossible. But Mother suggests that the serpent is guided more by jealousy of Campion than by a desire to destroy the planet. It may have inherited a penchant for emotion from Mother. Then we finally learn a bit more about the veil. It is a sensory filter of some kind and may be able to null Mother's caregiver impulses. A lot of thoughts on this. First, I think a lot of people assumed that the entity is an advanced AI, something created by people which, like predicted in the singularity theory, spun out of control. It was smart enough to improve on itself to the point where its power and intelligence exceeded humanity's. Over time, that would allow it to become godlike. But Grandmother described it as something studied by the humans of Kepler 22b. She described it as an entity. She doesn't describe it as something built by the humans. That doesn't mean it wasn't built by humans. Maybe it was, and they just don't know it. For example, their AI tech may have advanced so rapidly that when it manifested its more advanced form to them, it was no longer recognizable as the thing they built. Or it could be an entity created by humans or other intelligent life from another planet, and it was left on Kepler 22b for some purpose. Whatever it is, Grandmother seems convinced that the entity, for some reason, wants to destroy the planet, which I take to mean destroy any intelligent life on the planet besides itself. But that does seem at odds with what it said to Mother in the sim last season, while wearing Campion's face. It described the serpent as the next stage in humanity. It sounded like, yes, it was down with killing the human race, but it seemed like that was in service of building something else, versus Grandmother's description that made it sound like a purely destructive force. Who knows? Maybe it was totally lying to Mother, or maybe it used to be purely destructive, but now its aims have changed. Maybe it wants to create a new race of super serpents. One sort of out there theory I have, partially inspired by rereading 2001: A Space Odyssey recently, is that in that story, a very advanced alien species has left monoliths throughout the galaxy as a way to kind of find intelligent life. So once humanity has gotten advanced enough, we get to the moon, we find the monolith there, and that basically signals humanity has now advanced to a certain stage, and this alien species can now reach out to humanity, intelligent life. What if there was an advanced alien race out there that instead of looking to find intelligent life so it can cultivate it, what if it's looking for intelligent life so it can snuff it out? So maybe it's a super intelligent entity that was left by an alien race, and now that humans have found it, the entity takes on the task of eradicating humanity and any other intelligence it might find. That could explain why it devolved humans, essentially removing their intelligence. Maybe that's how it does it, not necessarily by killing everyone, but by reducing them to a more primitive state. So who knows, I'm definitely not going to die on the hill of that theory, but wanted to throw it out there. One other thought on this scene. I'm nervous about that veil. What happens to Mother with a dulled caregiving program? Maybe that unshackles her to go after the serpent, but could it also make her dangerous to everyone else? On the flip side, what happens to Grandmother without the veil? Mother described Grandmother as having superior technology, but she's been pretty complacent all season. Will removing the veil free her? And what will she do with her newfound freedom? She has Mother believing that wearing the veil will actually free her from the programming which currently controls her. But maybe that's not true. Maybe the veil will remove Mother's power while at the same time granting Grandmother hers. In any case, Grandmother's been this looming thing all season, and I'm hoping and expecting that she plays a larger role in the finale. She is the closest thing we have to communication with the ancient civilization from Kepler 22b, and answers to what is happening on this planet. They've been holding back all season, so with the finale upon us, I'm hoping they give us a lot to chew on between seasons. And fingers crossed we hear soon about a renewal for Season 3. Anyway, the episode is not over yet. In the woods, Vril's wounds get the better of her, and as she dies, she quickly scribbles down entries from the real Vril's diary. Part of her purpose was to carry on the girl's memories, so in her death, she tries to do that as best as she can, then dies. And a cheery voice comes on to warn that the product will soon become radioactive, so it needs to be disposed of. I felt for Vril here, but it also felt so unexpected. I guess I assumed she'd recovered from her wounds and was basically out of the woods. So the scene was a roller coaster that went from scratching my head to just once again feeling bad for Vril. But fingers crossed she can pull a father and someone resurrects her. That's where the episode wraps up. One thing I didn't mention, which I liked this episode, is that you could really feel it when the serpent powered up. It felt like doomsday. Everyone was tense, everyone battened down the hatches, and the outside world, with the super serpent looming in the sky, just felt like a very unsafe place. And tonally, I thought they really captured that. Anyway, just one episode left this season, so many open questions, and I'm sure most of them will go unanswered next episode, but I'm hoping we get some fun clues and revelations. We'll see. Before we wrap up, just wanted to mention that we now have a second channel for the One Take podcast. Click the link in the description or click the card in the upper right corner to check it out. Every week, I'm doing a new video there where I'm talking to one or more of my brothers or other guests about a variety of topics. This week was the new Batman movie, and next week will be something else. And if you prefer to just hear your podcasts, you can also subscribe on any podcast app, and I would be so happy if you'd check it out on either YouTube or in one of your podcast apps. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. With that, thank you for watching, and see you on the next One Take.